My name is Lauren Ellison, and for most of my life, my family treated me like background noise. The kind you only notice when it becomes inconvenient. At holidays, I was the one they forgot to call. At birthdays, the one they bought gift cards for, if they remembered at all. But the worst of it always came from my older sister, Madeline. In our house, she was the headline. I was the footnote. So when I got the invitation to her engagement party, addressed to, Miss L. Ellison, no +1, I almost didn't go. But something in me wanted to see it through. Not out of spite. Not even curiosity. Just a quiet need to look her in the eye and remember I didn't live under her shadow anymore. The event was held at a private estate in Connecticut. All white roses, champagne towers, and smiles so forced they could crack glass. I arrived in a black dress, simple and elegant, hoping to keep things quiet. I wasn't there to make a scene. Madeline spotted me from across the terrace and waved with a kind of brittle cheer. "Lauren!" she called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Glad you could make it. I told Grant we had one of those relatives." She turned to the group beside her, grinning. "The irrelevant one, remember?" I opened my mouth to respond, but someone else reacted first. A man beside her stiffened and looked over slowly, his brow tightening. "Wait," he said. "That voice. Have we met in a boardroom?" Growing up in the Ellison household meant learning early which roles were already taken. My sister Madeline was the golden one. Blonde, bright, born with the kind of presence that sucked all the oxygen out of a room, and made people thank her for it. She was the performer, the perfectionist, the one who won spelling bees and beauty pageants with the same plastic smile. My parents didn't just love her, they orbited her. I, on the other hand, learned how to be quiet. I wasn't shy. I was observant. I wasn't jealous. I was just tired. Tired of being the one no one noticed unless Madeline needed an audience or a scapegoat. At school, I outpaced her in grades. But when I brought home straight A's, my mom said, "Of course you did, honey. You always have your nose in a book." When Madeline brought home a B+ in gym, they threw her a congratulatory dinner. That was the rhythm of my childhood. Me working, them looking elsewhere. Even small things reminded me of the imbalance. At Christmas, Madeline would unwrap designer bags, while I got useful things, like notebooks and socks. When I graduated valedictorian, my dad showed up late and left during the speech. His reason? "I knew you'd do fine." It's not like it was a surprise. But nothing stung like the silence. Silence when I got accepted to college early. Silence when I published my first paper. Silence when I left home, and no one called to ask where I'd gone. I remember sitting in my dorm room with the acceptance letter from Columbia's economics program and realizing no one in my family had even asked what I wanted to study. By then, I'd stopped offering updates. I watched Madeline rack up Instagram followers and flirt her way into internships at PR firms while I worked nights as a data assistant, building the kind of life that didn't photograph well, but paid off in the long run. And every time I came home for a holiday, I could count on hearing some version of, "So, Lauren, are you still doing that numbers thing?" Or worse, "You've always been so private. It's hard to keep up with you." They said it like an accusation, like I had made myself irrelevant, but I wasn't irrelevant. I was just getting out of their way, so I could get somewhere worth going. When I left for New York after college, I didn't leave a note. There was no dramatic send-off, no hugs at the door. I packed my life into a used Civic, left a sticky note on the fridge that said, "Thanks for everything," and drove off before the sun was up. No one followed. No one called. Columbia was cold, fast, and indifferent. Exactly what I needed. No expectations. No family history hovering over my shoulder. I buried myself in behavioral economics and data modeling, fell in love with late nights at the library, and early mornings at internships no one ever asked about. I worked hard, but more than that, I worked smart. I didn't want attention. I wanted precision. After grad school, I landed a position at a small but aggressive investment firm in Manhattan. My job at first was nothing glamorous. Endless spreadsheets, pitch decks that got scrapped, coffee runs that no one thanked me for. But I paid attention. I watched what made clients nervous, what made founders sweat. I learned how people lied with confidence, and how money listened to none of it. By 29, I was running preliminary assessments solo. By 32, I was flying to London for cross-border reviews. And by 35, they gave me the title of partner. Not because I smiled in meetings, but because I saw the holes in a deal 3 pages before legal did. But no one at home knew that. They didn't know that Graywell Capital had over $10 billion under management, that I had veto power on acquisitions, that I sat in a boardroom with founders who had IPO dreams and exits bigger than my parents' entire retirement fund. They didn't know because they never asked, and I didn't offer. I'd learned early, giving them pieces of myself was like shouting into a void. So I stopped sharing, not out of bitterness, but out of efficiency. Let Madeline take over the family group chat with filtered photos of mimosas and manicures. Let her dominate the holiday tables with stories of her boyfriend of the month who really got her. What no one realized was that one of those boyfriends, Grant, had pitched his Series C to us 8 months before Madeline ever brought his name up. His company had promise, but also risk. I remembered his deck, sleek, optimistic, built on shaky user growth and inflated metrics. We flagged it for further review. He didn't know my name then. Most founders didn't. That was part of the advantage. I stayed invisible on purpose. Still, the irony didn't escape me. My sister had finally found a man who understood ambition. Her words, not mine. And he was sitting on funding from the firm I helped lead. I didn't say anything when she introduced him at Christmas, just shook his hand and asked polite questions. I could tell he didn't recognize me, not then. That was fine. He didn't need to, not yet. Madeline, as usual, made sure the spotlight stayed on her. "Lauren's still doing something with spreadsheets," she said during dinner, voice light but edged. "She's always been our mystery woman." There was laughter, polite, shallow. I smiled and refilled my wine. That was the rhythm of our family. Assumptions presented as jokes, disrespect camouflaged as concern. I could have corrected them, told them about the London meeting, the fund we just closed, the call I'd had with an EU regulator that morning. But it would have been wasted. In that room, Madeline was still the main character, and I was still the supporting cast. But unlike before, I no longer felt the sting, because I knew something they didn't. I knew that in 2 weeks, I'd be sitting across from Grant in a closed-door due diligence review. I'd be one of 5 voices deciding whether his company was worth another round. And I had questions, real ones, questions that couldn't be answered with charm or clean slide decks. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to prove anything. But when the time came, I wouldn't have to raise my voice. He'd recognize it on his own. The engagement party was held at a country estate in Connecticut, the kind that looked like it had been plucked out of a bridal magazine. Manicured hedges, string lights, and champagne towers waiting to be photographed more than consumed. I arrived early, not out of eagerness, but strategy. I didn't want to walk in behind Madeline's grand entrance or get cornered by one of our aunts asking about my personal life. The valet took my keys without a glance. The staff offered me champagne. I declined. I didn't come here to toast. I wore a black satin dress, modest cut, clean lines, no labels, the kind of outfit you could fade into the background with, or command a room if needed. I hadn't decided which I would do yet. Voices drifted across the terrace. Laughter, clinking glasses, heels on stone. Madeline's voice rang out above them, effortlessly theatrical. She'd always known how to hold attention like it owed her rent. When she spotted me, her smile stretched wide, too wide. "Lauren," she called, stepping over in heels, far too high for the gravel path. "I told Grant you'd come," I said. "My sister always shows up eventually." Her tone was syrupy, but I could feel the bite underneath. "Nice to see you, Madeline," I said, neutral. She leaned in for a kiss that barely brushed my cheek, then turned to the group of friends clustered near her. "Everyone, this is Lauren, the mysterious one I've told you about." Someone laughed politely. "She's always doing something economic?" Madeline glanced at me as if hoping I'd correct her. "We call her the silent genius, or maybe just silent." I smiled thinly. "I prefer Lauren." Grant appeared beside her then, tall and polished, in a way that felt rehearsed. His smile was charming, but his eyes looked tired. I recognized that look. Too many late nights selling too much vision to too many people who were smarter than they looked. "Lauren, this is Grant," Madeline said, looping her arm through his. "The future of tech and the future of my heart." He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you." Our eyes locked as I shook it. He blinked. "Wait," he said slowly. "Your voice. Have we met?" Madeline tilted her head. "I don't think so. She doesn't really get out much." But Grant didn't laugh. "No, I've heard you before. In a boardroom. Wait." He straightened slightly. "Graywell Capital, the Series C round review." His words dropped like a glass shattering. Madeline's smile faltered. I held his gaze. "Yes," I said simply. "You're on the committee?" he asked, incredulous. "I'm one of the partners." He went still, not embarrassed, alarmed. "I didn't know. They never gave names. It was just a voice behind the screen." "That's how we like it," I said, tone even. The silence around us thickened. Someone coughed. Someone else sipped too loudly. Madeline tried to recover. "Wait, you work for Graywell?" I turned to her. "No, I help run it." Her face drained just slightly. "You never said." "You never asked." Grant, to his credit, looked horrified, for the right reasons. He understood what had just happened. The power dynamic had flipped. The woman his fiancé had called irrelevant now held influence over whether his company lived to see its next quarter. He opened his mouth to say something, then thought better of it. I excused myself. I walked through the crowd, past white rose arrangements and waiters offering shrimp skewers, into the main hall where coats were neatly hung and no one was watching. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. It didn't feel like revenge. Not exactly. It felt like air, clean, cold, earned. I had spent years building something no one in that family cared to understand, and now I had nothing to prove, but everything to withhold. As I left the estate, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Lauren, we didn't realize how important your job was. Can we talk this week?" I didn't respond, not yet. 3 days after the engagement party, Grant emailed me directly. Subject line, follow-up. From Saturday. He opened with an apology, said he was embarrassed not to have recognized me sooner, that it was an honor to be in front of the same person he'd unknowingly pitched to, and that he hoped my impression of his company hadn't been tainted by personal entanglements. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to play games, but because I wanted to be sure of my voice when I did. Instead, I reviewed his deck again. I flagged the same soft spots: inflated user retention, overly generous projections, reliance on a single partnership that hadn't been formalized. I passed the notes to my team. Then I sat in the next due diligence call and listened to Grant try, carefully, too carefully, to sound neutral. He didn't mention me. I didn't mention him. I asked 3 questions. He answered them all with precision and mild panic. That was enough. 2 days later, I ran into Madeline outside a coffee shop in Midtown. She hadn't texted. She hadn't followed up. But when she saw me, she pulled her sunglasses off with practiced drama and said, "Lauren, can we talk?" I said yes. We sat down with iced lattes in silence. She fidgeted with her straw, like it might give her better words. "I didn't know," she started. "You should have said something." I raised an eyebrow. "Said what?" "That you were someone." The words felt clumsy in her mouth, like admitting I existed in a way she couldn't dismiss required new vocabulary. "I've always been someone, Madeline. You just weren't listening." She colored. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, no one ever talks about what you do. You don't post, you don't show up to things. And when I do, I'm introduced as the irrelevant one." She winced. "That was a joke." "No, that was a reveal." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of the old Madeline rising. "So this is what it's about? Payback? You wanted to embarrass me?" I laughed softly. "If I wanted that, I would have said something in front of everyone. But I didn't. I let you speak. I let you define me, like always. And then your fiancé recognized me." That wasn't me embarrassing you, Madeline. That was reality catching up. She fell silent. I'm not here to humiliate you, I continued, but I'm also not here to play small so you can feel large. We sat in stillness for a moment. Then she looked down at her drink and said, quieter than I'd ever heard her, "He respects you." "That's good," I said. "He should." She looked up. "Do you think he'll get funding?" "That depends on his answers, and the numbers, and whether he learns to tell the truth on page 6. She blinked. "So, you're still reviewing it?" I met her gaze. "Yes. And I'm not recusing myself just because we share a last name." That landed. When I stood to leave, she didn't stop me. She didn't hug me. But for the first time in years, she didn't say anything dismissive either. Back at the office, my team submitted our final recommendation. Grant's company had potential, but it needed to clean up its financials before it earned another round. Our decision? Defer. Not a no, not a yes. Just a reminder that perception alone doesn't close deals. Grant called me after the verdict came in. He was calm, professional. "I appreciate your feedback," he said. "We're already restructuring." "I hope you are," I said. "There's something solid there." "But solid isn't enough when you've been overselling." He paused. "You didn't have to take that call, you know, after everything." "I know." "Thank you." I didn't say you're welcome. I didn't need to. That night, as I walked home through the city, the air sharp with early spring, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before. I didn't want revenge. I wanted release. And I'd finally earned it. Not through shouting, not through proving, but by standing still long enough for the truth to become visible. Sometimes the best way to win is to stop needing them to lose. It's strange how silence feels different once it belongs to you. For most of my life, the silence from my family was a wound, a kind of quiet that echoed. When they ignored my wins, when they forgot birthdays, when they assumed I'd never be much of anything. It wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't say. That silence had weight, shame, distance. But now, that same quiet sits differently. I've stopped needing them to fill it. A week after the funding decision, Madeline sent me a message. Not a confrontation, not a performance, just a few lines. "I've been thinking, maybe I never really saw you. That's on me." I stared at it for a while, then archived it. I wasn't angry. I just no longer needed an apology that came too late, after too much space had grown between us. You can forgive someone without inviting them back in. That was a lesson I had to learn on my own. And Grant, he stayed professional. He sent quarterly updates. He even asked a month later if I'd be willing to give informal feedback on his revised projections. I said yes. We scheduled a 30-minute Zoom, and I spoke to him like I would any founder. He never brought up Madeline. I never asked. I heard through my mother, in a clipped voicemail, that the wedding was postponed. "They're reevaluating timelines," she said, like it was a scheduling glitch instead of a fallout. She still danced around things. That never changed. But I did. I don't attend family holidays anymore. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. I send gifts. I answer messages when it makes sense. I no longer walk into rooms where I'm expected to stay small. What they think of me no longer dictates the volume of my life. I've built something solid, something no toast, no headline, no Instagram story could summarize. My name doesn't need to be known in every room, just the right ones. The ones where decisions are made. The ones where value speaks louder than ego. Sometimes I still hear Madeline's voice in my head, laughing in that brittle way she always did when she felt threatened. I hear the word irrelevant, and I smile now. Not because it doesn't sting anymore, but because it no longer decides anything. She used it to erase me. I used it to remember what I deserved. And when people ask now what I do, I tell them the truth, but only if they've earned it. Because I am not irrelevant. I never was. I just learned how to make power so quiet. It didn't need to announce itself.